the rain, and the barn. Amara had always believed that marriage was built on trust, but trust, she learned, could crumble without warning. Her husband Rahil had once promised her a life of security, whispering vows that spoke of loyalty and love. Those promises dissolved the moment she discovered the truth. Another woman, another life he had built in secret while she cared for their children in silence. The confrontation had not been loud. Rahil rarely raised his voice, but his coldness carried the same sting. "You'll manage," he had said, his eyes fixed on the door rather than her face. When Amara pressed him, when she begged him to consider the children, his reply was simple and merciless. "Find your own way. I don't love you anymore." That night the sky split open with rain. Amara carried her 3 children through the storm, the youngest clinging to her chest, the older 2 stumbling beside her. She had nowhere to go. Relatives had turned away. Neighbors offered pity, but not space. Pride prevented her from knocking again on doors already shut against her. When her eyes caught the outline of a broken barn on the edge of the village, she felt desperation nudge her forward. The barn smelled of damp straw and rusting iron. Holes in the roof let the rain leak through in thin, steady lines. The wind pushed against the boards as if trying to break in. Yet it was shelter, if only barely. She laid down her children on a pile of dry straw she managed to gather in the corner. Their small breaths shivered in the cold. Their bodies curled together like fragile birds. For 3 days, she remained there. Rain pounded outside, an unrelenting chorus that matched the ache in her chest. Hunger gnawed at them all. Zoya, her eldest at 7, asked for food with a trembling whisper. Hadi, only 5, clutched his stomach in silence. Sarah, the baby, cried until sleep claimed her in exhaustion. Amara tried to soothe them, tried to convince herself she was still enough. She collected what little water the roof dripped into a broken pot, sharing sips with parched lips. She tore pieces of stale bread she had managed to save before Rahil cast them out, stretching it as far as she could. At night, when the children finally drifted into uneasy dreams, she let her own tears fall. The barn was quiet then, except for the tapping of rain and the groaning of its old wooden frame. She whispered apologies into the darkness. Apologies for failing to protect, apologies for loving a man who had betrayed them, apologies for not knowing what came next. Her thoughts returned again and again to Rahil. How could a man abandon the children who bore his name? How could he turn his back so easily, as though years of marriage meant nothing? Anger surged within her, but it was always dulled by exhaustion. Even fury requires strength, and Amara's strength was spent keeping her children alive. Still, something in her refused to collapse entirely. Each morning she rose before the little ones stirred, gathering what bits of dry straw remained, patching leaks in the roof with scraps she found in the barn. Her hands bled from splinters, her back ached, but she moved as if driven by a force greater than herself. Survival was not optional. Her children needed her alive, needed her fighting even when hope seemed as scarce as food. By the 3rd night, the rain had become a kind of rhythm, steady and endless. Amara lay awake, staring through a crack in the boards where a sliver of moonlight pressed in. She thought of escape, of where she might go once the storm lifted. But each possibility ended in a wall of uncertainty. Alone, with no money and 3 children depending on her, her world felt impossibly small. Yet within that small world, a spark remained. As she listened to her children's breathing, uneven but steady, she told herself that betrayal did not end her story. Rahil had chosen infidelity, had chosen to dishonor their vows, but she still carried within her the power to choose differently. She would choose to endure. She would choose to seek a future, no matter how impossible it seemed tonight. A sudden gust rattled the barn door. Amara sat upright, clutching Sarah to her chest, her heart racing. But the door only creaked, settling back into its frame. She closed her eyes, her body trembling from cold and exhaustion. Tomorrow, she thought. Tomorrow something must change. She did not know how or when, but she believed, because she had no other choice, that the storm could not last forever. And outside, Though she could not see him yet, a man named Ibrahim walked the same rain-soaked paths, his lantern cutting through the darkness. He did not know he was moving toward a broken barn where a woman and 3 children huddled against despair. He only knew that he, too, was searching for something he had lost long ago, and perhaps for something he was yet to find. The gathering storm, the broadcast of the king's mockery, traveled faster than any ship. By the time his voice had finished echoing through the Colosseum, millions of humans were already watching in horror, in fury, and in disbelief. Mothers wept as they recognized faces among the captives. Children pointed at the screen and asked why their fathers were not there to protect them. Soldiers clenched their fists so tight their knuckles bled. On Earth, the feed lit up every city. In the megacities sprawled across the continents, the giant screens that once carried entertainment now replayed the humiliation of their own kind. Crowds gathered, at first silent, then restless. By the 3rd replay, anger burned through the masses like fire through dry grass. In Washington, in New Geneva, in the domes of Luna, protests surged. Thousands shouted outside government halls, demanding justice. Old divisions dissolved. No one cared whether they were Martian colonists, Terran nationalists, or belt miners. All that mattered was the insult carved into humanity's dignity. The president of the United Confederacy, Ilara Voss, stood at her office window, watching the crowd in the Capitol Square. Their chants shook the glass. No mercy, no surrender, vengeance. She turned away, her expression hard. For years she had balanced on the knife's edge of diplomacy, trying to avoid all-out war. But the image of the king towering over caged women and frightened children played in her mind, again and again. Across the oceans, military high command convened in a subterranean chamber. Generals, admirals, and intelligence chiefs filled the long table. The mood was grim, yet charged with energy. Admiral Rahman, commander of the Earth Fleet, broke the silence. "They have mocked us before," he said, voice steady. "But this time they mocked our children. They mocked our women. I ask you, how many more insults must we endure before we act?" A general from the Martian Defense Corps slammed his fist onto the table. "Enough talk. The colonies are already mobilizing. My officers report volunteers flooding recruitment centers. They demand retribution. But we are outnumbered 10-1, an intelligence director countered. The Empire's fleets are vast. If we declare open war, we risk extinction." Admiral Rahman's eyes narrowed. "If we do nothing, we are already extinct. Extinct as a people with honor. You saw the footage. Our enemies think us broken. That arrogance is our weapon." The room fell into heavy silence. One by one, the heads around the table nodded. On Mars, miners abandoned their drills to enlist. On Titan, entire families packed supplies, preparing to support the war effort. The Belt syndicates, usually lawless, offered their fleets of gunships in exchange for nothing more than vengeance. Even pacifist colonies on Europa, long resistant to militarization, opened their shipyards to retrofit freighters into war frigates. Humanity had never been this united. Meanwhile, in alien embassies across Earth and the colonies, confusion reigned. Messages poured in from galactic allies, warning humanity not to escalate. Some pleaded, others threatened. One ambassador dared suggest the humans should be grateful their captives had not been exterminated outright. He was escorted from the chamber under guard while crowds outside hurled stones at his armored convoy. The tide was irreversible. President Voss stepped onto the balcony of the Capitol spire. The crowd roared at the sight of her. She raised her hands, waiting until silence fell, and spoke into the night. "They thought we would kneel. They thought we would cower. They showed us our sisters, our daughters, our sons, and they laughed." Her voice carried across the square, amplified by the spire's broadcast towers. But humanity does not kneel. Humanity does not cower. And humanity will never forget. A cheer surged through the crowd, a thunderous wave of voices. She raised her hand again, eyes like steel. "From this day forth, the United Confederacy declares war upon the Eternal Empire. Not a limited conflict, Not a border skirmish. All-out war. We fight until our captives are free. We fight until their king kneels. We fight until every child can look to the stars and see freedom, not chains. The roar that followed shook the city to its foundations. In orbit, shipyards blazed to life, reactors burning through the night. Thousands of engineers, mechanics, and laborers worked side by side, driven by fury rather than pay. Old ships, once mothballed, were dragged from storage and given new teeth. Civilian freighters were gutted and reborn as carriers in gunboats. Every day that passed, the fleet grew stronger. Across the colonies, training camps overflowed. Farmers, students, engineers, and factory workers took up arms. Children painted war slogans on the sides of freighters. Old veterans donned their uniforms once more. Humanity had become a storm, and nothing could hold it back. In the throne world palace, the galactic king lounged in arrogance, still laughing at the footage of a mother's defiance. To him, humanity's fury was nothing but an amusing spark, soon to be crushed beneath his fleets. He could not hear the chants rising across Earth. He could not feel the fever building in the shipyards, or see the war banners unfurling above Martian cities. He could not understand that when humans declared a fight for their children, they would burn heaven and earth to win it. Shadows of the past. The rain finally eased, leaving the village soaked in silence. Mist clung to the fields, and the barn, though less battered, carried the lingering scent of damp wood and old straw. For the first time in days, Amara dared to step outside with her children. The ground squelched under their bare feet, but the open sky felt like a release from prison walls. Ibrahim had returned at dawn, carrying baskets of food and blankets. His presence was becoming familiar, steady, predictable, almost safe. Zoya clung to him as he showed her how to peel an apple with patient hands. Hadi followed close, eager to copy the movements. Sarah giggled whenever Ibrahim lifted her high above his shoulders, laughter bubbling where tears had lived too long. Amara watched from a distance, her heart tightening. Each smile from her children felt like sunlight on her skin, yet it carried with it a shadow. Was this trust or weakness? Was she allowing another man to step into a place that was not his to claim? The answer arrived sooner than she expected. That afternoon, a figure appeared on the muddy road. Broad-shouldered, his step arrogant despite the muck clinging to his boots, Rahil. The sight of him froze Amara in place. Her breath caught, the world narrowing to the man who had broken every promise yet still had the power to unbalance her. Amara, Rahil called, as though his voice were enough to summon obedience. The children stiffened. Zoya grabbed her mother's skirt, half hiding behind her. Hadi frowned, uncertain, while Sarah began to whimper at the unfamiliar tone. "You shouldn't be here," Amara said, her voice sharper than she felt. Rahil's eyes swept over the barn, the baskets of food, and finally landed on Ibrahim, who stood quietly at Amara's side. His jaw tightened. "So, this is where you've been?" "With him." The accusation burned, though it carried no truth. Amara's cheeks flushed, not from guilt, but from the weight of shame he cast upon her. "You left us," she said firmly. "We had nowhere else." Rahil's expression hardened. "You're still my wife. You think I'll allow you to ruin my name by playing widow before I'm dead?" The words cut, each syllable dipped in cruelty. Ibrahim did not move, but his presence alone steadied Amara. He spoke only once, his tone calm, but unyielding. "She and the children are safe here. That is more than you gave them." Rahil turned on him, anger flaring. "And who are you to interfere in what is mine?" Ibrahim's gaze did not waver. A man who knows the value of shelter. The silence that followed was thick with tension. Amara's heart pounded, torn between two realities. The man who betrayed her and claimed ownership without love, and the man who offered nothing but quiet refuge without demand. That night, Rahil returned again, pressing his argument in whispers meant only for her. He spoke of reputation, of duty, of the children needing their father. He promised change, swore that the other woman meant nothing, even as his eyes betrayed the lie. Amara listened, her chest a battlefield. Part of her longed for the simplicity of returning, for the illusion of family restored. But the other part, the part carved by hunger, by the barn's cold nights, by Ibrahim's steady kindness, refused to bend. Alone after Rahil left, she sat in the barn with her children asleep around her. Ibrahim lingered at the door, not intruding, simply waiting as though he knew silence could heal more than words. Her voice broke the quiet. "What if I'm wrong?" she whispered. Ibrahim's reply came softly. "Then you'll know it in time. But some choices, Amara, are not about right or wrong. They are about who you choose to become." His words lingered long after he walked away, leaving her to the dark and her thoughts. The storm outside had ended, but within Amara, another storm gathered strength, one that would not be calmed by weather or silence. Choosing shelter, morning sunlight poured through the gaps in the barn wall, chasing away the damp shadows that had been her world for too long. Amara stirred awake to the sound of her children laughing softly as they played with the scraps of straw. Their voices should have lifted her heart, yet unease pressed down heavier than the barn's sagging roof. Rahil had returned the previous night, his words still echoing, "You are mine. Come back, or you'll be nothing." She had not answered him then, but silence was no shield. A choice hovered like a blade above her. Return to the man who had broken his vows, or remain in the fragile safety Ibrahim offered. Her gaze drifted outside, where Ibrahim worked near the field's edge. He moved with quiet purpose, repairing a fence battered by the storm. The children had begun to look for him each morning, their little eyes lighting up as if his presence meant warmth itself. And yet, guilt whispered in her chest. She was still Rahil's wife in name. Could she let her heart even consider another? Or had Rahil, through his betrayal, already severed the vows beyond repair? By midday, Rahil came again. His arrival was loud, his boots stamping into the barn as though he were reclaiming lost territory. The children shrank back instinctively, crowding near their mother. "You've made your point," he said, his tone brittle with restrained anger. "Now it ends. You come home with me. No more shame. No more gossip." Amara straightened, her body trembling but her eyes steady. "Home?" she asked, her voice low. "You threw us out. You chose another woman. You left me to beg the rain for mercy." Rahil's jaw clenched. "Mistakes happen. I'm still your husband. That means something. Does it?" she asked, bitterness slicing through her words. Before Rahil could respond, Ibrahim appeared in the doorway. His presence was calm, not confrontational, yet it carried weight. "You don't get to decide her worth," he said firmly. "You gave up that right when you turned your back." Rahil sneered. "And you think you'll replace me? A widower with nothing but dirt on his hands." Ibrahim didn't flinch. A man with dirt on his hands is still cleaner than one with betrayal on his soul. The barn fell silent. Amara felt her heart hammering, torn between fear and clarity. She saw Rahil's arrogance, his empty promises, the chains he wrapped in the name of marriage. And she saw Ibrahim, not perfect, not demanding, simply present. A man who had brought bread when hunger was unbearable, who had shielded her without asking for anything in return. Her children broke the silence. Zoya clutched her hand and whispered, "Mama, don't go." Hadi's wide eyes brimmed with unspoken fear. Sarah, too young to understand, reached toward Ibrahim, giggling at the sight of him. The sound shattered the last of Amara's hesitation. She rose, drawing her children close. "Rahil," she said, her voice steady, "you betrayed us first. Infidelity broke what we had, not me. I choose dignity over chains. I choose safety over fear, and I will not go back." Rahil's face darkened, but her words had already severed the tie he tried to pull. He spat a final curse and stormed from the barn, his footsteps fading into the distance. When the silence returned, it was different, lighter, freer. Amara's knees weakened, and she sank to the straw, her children wrapped around her. Relief and sorrow mingled in her chest, but above all, there was clarity. Ibrahim stepped forward, his voice gentle. "You don't owe me anything," he said, "but you and the children have a place with me if you choose it. Not because you are weak, but because no one should weather storms alone. Tears filled Amara's eyes, not of despair this time, but of release. She looked at her children, their faces bright with hope, and then at Ibrahim, whose quiet strength had become her anchor in the chaos. "I don't know if I'm ready for more," she admitted, her voice trembling. "Then don't be," he replied softly. "Be ready only for shelter." The word echoed through her, carrying a meaning deeper than walls or a roof. Shelter was safety. Shelter was dignity. Shelter was the first step toward a life not bound by betrayal, but built on trust. As the day waned, Amara and her children walked with Ibrahim toward his farmhouse. The fields glistened in the late sun, the air fresh with the scent of rain-washed earth. For the first time in many days, she felt warmth spread through her chest that was not born of struggle, but of possibility. The storm had ended, not only in the sky above, but within her heart. And as Ibrahim opened his door to them, Amara knew she had not just found shelter, she had chosen it.